Welcome to tutorial number 1 about using PunyInform to develop a text adventure. And this will just be a brief introduction to start developing and set up some locations for people who are entirely new to PunyInform and to Inform 6 programming language in general. If you wonder about how to set up a programming environment, installing the library and the tools you need, then there's a link in the description below, so you can follow that. So let's dive into it. We start by copying a file called minimal.inf. So we create a copy of that. And we rename it to what we like. Let's say we call it my first game for now. And then we open it in a text editor. I'm using the Atom text editor, but you can use Notepad or Notepad++ or whatever you like. So here I have my first game. And this is what it looks like. So this is like a template for a game. First you have a few lines defining options that you usually always want to have enabled. So this is this first section. Just leave it there. Then we say what the story is called. My first game. PunyInform tutorial game. When the game starts, the name of the game will be printed and the headline will be printed. Then if we want to have time shown in the status line, we uncomment this line with status line time. We don't in this case. And then here are a number of optional settings which we can add. If we uncomment these lines, we add things to the library, which makes a library a bit bigger and sometimes a bit slower. So we just enable them if we need them. While we are developing a game, this runtime errors should usually be set to 2. Once we're done with the game and we're releasing it, we want to set it to 0. 2 means that we get full error messages. 1 means that we get error codes, and 0 means that we get as little error checking as possible. So once we're done testing the game and everything, then we should set it to 0 to save some space and time. Debug is also a good idea to have while we're developing, so we'll use that. And we'll skip the other ones for now. Then comes include globals.h. This is setting up the global variables and constants needed by the PunyInform library. So after this point, we can write routines, code, objects, whatever, which refers to these global variables and the properties and attributes defined, etc. We're not using any PunyInform extensions right now. And then we include puny.h, which is the rest of the library. Then we create our objects, and this sample game has two objects set up. We'll skip them for now and write our own objects instead. And then there's the initialize routine, which is called when the game starts. And it's there to say where the player starts and what to print. If you want to print something when the game starts, you do it here. So let's see. We're not going to start in a library, so we'll wait. We'll need to change that. Anyway, most of the coding in PunyInform is done in objects. So you define an object for each location, an object for each thing that you can interact with or look at or whatever. There's also an object for the player. If you have people in your game, each person is also an object. And you can use object for other various other things as well. So we'll set up one object for the first location, and I decided it's a jetty. Object jetty, and I write a name for it. And this is how you define an object. You start with the name object, and then the name that this object will be called in code. So in this case it's jetty. Capitalization doesn't matter, so I can refer to it as jetty with a capital J or not a capital J, it doesn't matter. And then there's a string here, which is the name of this object, the name string. And then I have two sections to an object declaration. It's properties and attributes. The property section starts with, and the attribute section starts with has. And I can declare them in any order, and I can skip one of them if I want to. I prefer declaring the properties first. So then I say with, and a location always has to have a description. That's a text printed when the player enters the location or types look when they're in the location. So we say description, and then I type a string. Could be a routine as well if I wanted to vary, but in this case I'm just happy with the string. It's a nice sturdy jetty. And then after each of these properties you must have a comma to say that that's the end of the property. The property always starts with the property name and then one or more values. So it can be an array of values, so it could be like 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 values. Depending on the game format that you're compiling to, it could be more. It could be up to 32 values. But it could also be a single value like here, and that's like probably the most common thing. And that value could be a string or a routine, or it could be a number, or a dictionary word, or an array of these things. In this case, it's just a string. So it has to have a description. That's first part. And then if we want the player to be able to see something in this location, we add one attribute, which is light. And attributes are added just with space between. So if I want more attributes, I just type them space and just the next attribute. But in this case, I'm done here, so I just end the object declaration with semicolon. And this is actually a complete location. Doesn't have to be any harder than that. And many locations aren't much more complicated than that. There will be directions, of course, as well that you can go, but we'll get to those when we have one more location. So we're adding another location, and let's say this is a ship. And let's say this is a pirate ship. So in the code, we will refer to it as ship, and the name that's printed for the player is pirate ship. With option I prefer to put each property on a new line, but you do as you please. Inform doesn't care. This is big pirate ship. There are cannons everywhere. And then the comma to end that property. And this location has light as well. Now we can actually say that we're starting on the jetty. Your and we'll print something just get the game started. So I'll save this file. And we'll try to compile it. I start a command prompt. And I enter this directory here. And I type inform 6. My first game. Not yet. Ah. Okay. Close this and rename the file because I had an extra letter in there like this. And so I compile it. So inform 6, that's the name of the compiler. Minus v3 means compile this to a version 3 Z code file. And then the name of the source code file. And I have to tell it where to look for library files. So I add this plus lib. So this is saying that when my source code file says include this or that file, then look for these files in the directory lib. and I press enter and it's compiled. So if I check here with dir, then I see that this is about 27 kilobyte, and if I start it, this is what I see. So I can see that the initial text is printed, and then the name of the starting location and the description, and the name of the starting location is also here in the status line, and it says score 0 and move 0. Problem is I can't go anywhere, so I'll close that again. And we'll add some exits. So let's say I can go west from the jetty and get to the ship. And then I probably want to be able to go east from the ship to get to the jetty as well. Ta-da! Save it. Compile it again. Works fine. And start it. Now I can go west and end up on the pirate ship. Now let's add a little bit more to this. First, let's have a look at this. If I try to go up, that works. It kind of works. I can't go that way, but it recognizes that this is a direction. Down, in is another direction, out is a direction. If I try to go southeast, it says, I don't understand that word. Go southeast. No, don't understand. That's because in PunyInform, these directions are not part of the basic setup. Northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest are optional. So if you want to use them, you can, but you don't. They're not included by default. So what I do is I include this line, constant optional full directions. Now we have access to all directions. It makes the game file a little bigger and makes the game a little slower. Not slower like it will be noticeable in itself, maybe, especially not on a modern computer, but maybe on a really slow 8-bit computer it will make a difference. So just you enable it if you need it, if you want it. So let's add another location now, and let's say that we have a location here which we call, I can define them as in any order I like, but I just pick one. There's a beach, sandy beach with description, such a nice beach, has light. So let's say if we go southeast from the jetty, we get to the beach. And so if we go northwest from the beach, we get to the jetty. We can also add this in the text, of course. Something like that. Also, there's another trick you can do. If you want a location to be described in a different way the first time the player sees it, you can add an initial description, just called initial. Well, so, and a comma to end it, of course. So now I save the file and let's compile it. So, made a mistake. It's saying that on line 43, Northwest 2 seems to be part of property data. Yeah, that's correct. Description is missing the comma. So, save it again. And that looks good. And now let's start it. Southeast from here. Go to Sandy Beach. Northwest, come back. West, we'll come to the pirate ship and we'll get the description which was stored in initial property. Wow, what a fantastic ship. But now if we type look, we get the common description, the one just called description. And if we leave the ship and come back or whatever, we will never see that description again. That initial description is just the first time that the ship is described. Okay, one more trick. Maybe we think it's a bit boring that it's just saying you can't go that way for all other directions, which we haven't defined any exits for. So let's do something about it. There are two things we can do. We could say, let's say on Jetty, we add that if we go south, we could say that there's land in that direction, but you get your feet wet. So instead of saying the location that we will end up in, we can place a string here and that will be printed, and we're not going there to that place. We're not going anywhere in that direction. Then there's another way. We can add a can't go message, and that will be the default message instead of you can't go in that direction or whatever the game prints for this location. So can't go for the Jetty could be there might be sharks out there. Save. We compile it again. And we start. Now we try to go south from here. And if we go east, northeast, up, down, any direction which we haven't defined leads to somewhere else, we'll get that message. And this is just for this location. So if we go from the ship, we'll get the usual, you can't go that way. And that's about as far as I intend to go with this tutorial. That's actually enough to start building a game, start at least adding the map and the map connections. And then I intend to make another tutorial for the next step in game making. Thank you for watching.